Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Testing Psychologist podcast, the podcast where we talk all about the business and practice of psychological and neuropsychological assessment. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Sharp, licensed psychologist, group practice owner, and private practice coach.
This episode is brought to you by PAR. Psychologists need assessment tools for a more diverse population these days. PAR is helping by making many of their Spanish print forms available online through PAR iConnect. Learn more at parinc.com/Spanish-language-products.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of 2022. In keeping with tradition, I'll be reviewing the best episodes of the year as determined by the most downloads. And I will say right off the bat, there were some surprises in this year's list. So I'm excited to share that with you. Before I get to that, I want to do a little bit of reflection. This is the end of year 6 for the podcast. When I stop to think about it, there aren't many things that I have done consistently for 6 years. Being married, owning my practice, running, those are the ones that come to mind right off the bat. I mean, not even grad school took 6 years. So at this point, I think I'm going to stop being surprised by the longevity and just lean into it. I think after 6 years, I can say that the Testing Psychologist podcast is apparently here to stay. So if anybody is worried about it going away, that's not happening. There's still plenty to talk about in the world of testing. So this was a remarkable year in many ways. I think I continue to have the incredible fortune of interviewing truly amazing guests. And in fact, 3 of the episodes here are interviews with returning guests, which was an extra blessing to be able to continue to cultivate and have these relationships with folks and have them back on the podcast knowing that we're going to have a great time and a really quality interview. Downloads for the podcast continue to increase, showing that there are plenty of folks out there who are invested in testing and running fulfilling testing practices. So tons of gratitude for all of those of you who are out there listening and spreading the word about the podcast and sharing it with your friends and colleagues. I really, really appreciate that. Before we get to the list of episodes, I want to give a quick shout out of thanks to my editor, Laura, who has stuck with me, and the moderating team of the Testing Psychologist Facebook group for keeping our group on the rails, and of course all of my guests who've continued to show up and bring just stellar content to these interviews. So thank you all. Looking forward to 2023, and let's get to the best episodes from the past year. All right, here we go, folks. Drum roll, please. Starting with the 5th most downloaded episode, and perhaps the biggest surprise of this list, because this is the first time that a business episode has cracked the top 5 and been one of the top 5 most downloaded episodes of the year. So the number 5 most popular episode of the Testing Psychologist podcast was the EOS Journey Part 4, Vision Day 1. So this was fascinating to me to see this. Of all the episodes, first, that it's a business episode. Second, that it's part of the EOS series, which I would think would apply to a narrower range of audience. And then even within that it was Vision Day 1 that was most popular. Perhaps because we talked a lot about values. So this episode was all about, or mostly about, developing values in your practice. And I walked through the process that we went through with our EOS implementer to develop our values and our core focus. So if you're a practice owner and you're looking for an exercise to develop values in your practice, that might be a good one to listen to. Now, it is part of an ongoing series. So I think at this point I'm up to 9 episodes in the series where I'm documenting the process of implementing EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System, in our practice. It's a business framework. So listen to the whole series, but if you want the most popular one, listen to part 4 on Vision Day 1. All right. The 4th most popular episode is not going to be a surprise to anyone. This was an interview with the one and only Dr. Stephanie Nelson called We're All Wrong Sometimes: Blind Spots, Biases, and Getting Better. So Stephanie has been on the podcast several times, but this episode was particularly popular. She talked all about the biases that come into our clinical decision-making and ways to circumvent and lessen the impact of those biases. So this was illuminating, as all interviews are, and really showcased, Stephanie's knowledge around the ways that we kind of back ourselves into a corner and run into some blind spots with our clinical decision making, and how it's a normal process, but it's also a process that you can work on and do something about. So if you're looking to improve your clinical decision making and lessen your biases, definitely check out We're All Wrong Sometimes with Stephanie Nelson. The 3rd most downloaded episode was another return guest, Dr. Jordan Wright, talking about context-driven conceptualization and assessment. Now, that is a mouthful of a title, but Jordan has been on the podcast a couple times before as well. And in this episode, he is talking about the different factors to consider when we are doing our conceptualization. And this is really important. So we talk about environmental factors, cultural factors, and the many other elements that can drive our conceptualization that goes beyond just the data that we have. We talk about the addressing framework from Pamela Hayes and many other things. So this is a fantastic episode. Again, if you are looking to have a richer approach to your clinical conceptualization and decision making, this is a good one. Check out Context-Driven Conceptualization and Assessment with Jordan Wright.
Let's take a break to hear from our featured partner. As psychologists, we know that the more people we can reach, the more we can help. To do this, we need assessment tools that allow us to assist a more diverse population. PAR is helping by making some of their most popular Spanish language tests available online through PAR iConnect, giving you more flexibility in serving your clients. Learn more at parinc.com/Spanish-language-products. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Okay, y'all, we're getting close. The 2nd most downloaded episode of the year is another return guest. Dr. Donna Henderson came back to deliver a masterclass for a case presentation with an autistic adolescent girl. Now, I'm going to give Donna a shout out because her episode on autism in girls and women, the original episode, is the most downloaded episode ever for the Testing Psychologist podcast. So it's not a surprise that her return interview, or masterclass rather, with an autistic adolescent girl was so popular. So she walks through a case presentation for this girl and talks about decision-making and diagnosis and recommendations for this particular case. And it's a great illustration of autism in females and things we might consider, and how those concepts from her first interview really come to life. So I imagine this will continue to be very popular. If you want to learn a little bit more about how autism in girls shows up in real life, check out this masterclass from Dr. Donna Henderson. And now, our top most popular episode from 2022. A complete surprise. I would never have seen this coming, but it was a clear winner. The episode was called Beyond ODD and Conduct Disorder with Dr. Akeem Marsh and Dr. Laura Cox. So these guests are first-time guests, and they came on as a team to talk about the release of their recent book, which addresses these very topics, ODD and conduct disorder. And during the episode, we talk about, as the title suggests, looking beyond these diagnoses, these disruptive behavior diagnoses, to really get underneath and understand what might be going on for these kids who are exhibiting these disruptive behaviors. So Dr. Marsh and Dr. Cox work in an urban environment. I believe they're in New York. And they share so many stories about their work with kids and give a ton of real-life examples of how they are investigating the impact of trauma on these kids' lives and how to connect with kids who have been traumatized and are, supposedly disruptive behavior kids. It was a fantastic episode. There were a lot of takeaways and plenty of information to think about. It even for me, as someone who's very skeptical of the utility of an ODD diagnosis or a conduct disorder diagnosis, I took a lot away from this episode in terms of specific examples and ways to conceptualize these kids differently and respect all the contextual factors that are contributing to some of these behaviors that we see. So absolutely go check that out. It's called Beyond ODD and Conduct Disorder with Dr. Akeem Marsh and Dr. Laura Cox. So there you have it, folks. That's it. That is the top 5 episodes of 2022. So blessed to continue to have the opportunity to talk with amazing folks and share this information with all of you. So thank you for tuning in. If you want to check out any of those episodes, they are all linked in the show notes, and you're welcome to go back and listen for first or second or third time. I hope that you'll continue to listen to the Testing Psychologist podcast. As always, I will be planning additional, hopefully helpful content for 2023 and engaging in some new experiments. Certainly bringing back some folks who are rock stars and consistent guests here on the podcast. So lots to look forward to. In the meantime, enjoy whatever may be left of 2022 and Happy New Year. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Always grateful to have you here. I hope that you take away some information that you can implement in your practice and in your life. Any resources that we mentioned during the episode will be listed in the show notes, so make sure to check those out. If you like what you hear on the podcast, I would be so grateful if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're a practice owner or aspiring practice owner, I'd invite you to check out the Testing Psychologist mastermind groups. I have mastermind groups at every stage of practice development, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We have homework, we have accountability, we have support, we have resources. These groups are amazing. We do a lot of work and a lot of connecting. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the details at thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting. You can sign up for a pre-group phone call and we will chat and figure out if a group could be a good fit for you. Thanks so much. The information contained in this podcast and on the Testing Psychologist website are intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no doctor-patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host or guests of this podcast and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of any mental health practitioner or medical provider, please seek one in your area. Similarly, if you need supervision on clinical matters, please find a supervisor with an expertise that fits your needs.